Dragon Shield just came out with their new dual sleeves, which are just like their other sleeves, except they have a black background instead of a white background when you put your cards in there. So they're super slick looking, and they have a clear glossy front, so it shows off all your foils really well. Check them out on dragonshield.com. Use my affiliate link down below. It helps support the channel. Hey guys, welcome to BudgetEDH. I'm your host Mike, and on this week's episode we bring you Wilhelt the Rotcleaver $50 budget deck upgrade. Wilhelt is 2 a blue and a black for a legendary creature zombie warrior. Whenever another zombie you control dies, if it didn't have decayed, create a 2/2 black zombie creature token with decayed. Decayed says it can't block. When it attacks, sacrifice it at the end of combat. At the beginning of your end step, you may sacrifice a zombie. If you do, draw a card. So Wilhelt is, to nobody's surprise, a zombie tribal commander, which is really cool. Has some really powerful abilities. Being able to sacrifice your zombies at the end of your turn to be able to draw a card is awesome. And when you do sacrifice a zombie, if it didn't have decayed, you're going to be able to create a 2/2 decayed zombie as well. And this ability applies whenever any other zombie you control dies. So really powerful abilities. What we really want to look to do with this deck is to get some additional value off of those tokens that we're going to have. We have a lot of ways of putting tokens onto the battlefield, not just with Wilhelt, but with a lot of cards in here. So you're going to see a very heavy token generating theme in this deck, and we're going to play heavily into that with aristocrat style cards. So there's quite a few that come into the deck, and we will also be putting quite a few into the deck with our 10 cards that we are going to add. We also have a lot of ways of pumping our team up. There's a lot of zombie lords in here that come in the deck that were either reprinted or new cards as well. We're going to also look to pump that number up as well with the 10 cards that we're going to add. The main way that we're going to be able to win is through combat. Now we do have a lot of ways of dealing incremental damage through our aristocrats theme as well, but the main way we'll be able to win this game is with all those zombie tokens and getting them bigger with all of our lords that we have in here. Let's go over the stats of this deck. So we've got 9 ramp spells in here. There's 8 card draw spells in here, which is a little on the light side, so we will be looking to beef that up when we get to the cards that we want to add. Interaction also on the light side with 8. We've got a ton of zombies. We've got 36 zombies in this deck. We've got 18 ways of recurring our zombies or aristocrats type cards in here. And then we've got 40 lands, which is a little on the heavy side, but we are going to leave it the way it is. So if you want to go past the 10 cards that we included in here, you could look to remove like maybe 2 or 3 lands and put another couple of cards in here as well. Let's go over some of the more powerful zombies in this deck. The ones that are going to pump our team up, going to make those tokens quite a bit bigger. So first up, we've got Lord of the Accursed. Other zombies you control get +1/+1. This can also pay a cost and tap it to give all your zombies menace as well, making it a lot easier to get in for combat damage and kill your opponents. Then we've got Diregraph Captain. It's got Death Touch. Other zombie creatures you control get +1/+1. And whenever another zombie you control dies, target opponent loses a life as well. Cemetery Reaper, same thing. All your zombies are going to get +1/+1. You can pay 3 and tap it, exile target creature card from a graveyard, and you get to put a zombie token onto the battlefield as well. Then we've got Death Baron. Zombies you control get +1/+1 in Death Touch, and then Liliana's Mastery also give your zombies +1/+1, and then it's going to give you 2 zombies when it enters the battlefield. Next up, we're going to go over some of these zombies that are included in this deck, the reprinted cards that are great in a zombie tribal deck. So we've got Undead Augur. Whenever it or another zombie you control dies, you draw a card and you lose a life. So it's another way of drawing a bunch of cards in the deck. So very powerful ability to have in a zombie. Diregraph Colossus. It enters the battlefield with a +1/+1 counter on it for each zombie card in your graveyard. Whenever you cast a zombie, put a 2/2 black zombie creature token onto the battlefield tapped. So awesome for making zombie tokens, which is perfect for this deck. Gleaming Overseer, I actually really like in this deck. It gives all your zombie tokens hexproof and menace. We will have a ton of zombie tokens on the battlefield with this deck. We have a lot of ways of making them. So giving them protection and menace is a very powerful ability. Then we've got Cleaver Scob. Pay 3 and tap it, sacrifice another zombie, create 2 tokens that are copies of the sacrificed creature. So this is a nice way of cashing in your zombies to put 2 zombie tokens onto the battlefield. And there are a couple of creatures in here that have synergy with tokens, so you can actually get that benefit off of this card. Tomb Tyrant gives your zombies +1/+1, so it's another one of those lords, but it also has pay 3 and tap it, sacrifice a creature to return a zombie creature card at random from your graveyard to the battlefield. You can only activate it if there is at least 3 zombie creature cards in your graveyard. So you can get rid of some of those decayed tokens and bring back some of your more powerful zombies that you may have in your graveyard. Eternal Skylord is another card that gives a benefit to your zombie tokens. This one is a little bit better than the other one we talked about. This one gives your zombie tokens flying, which is a much better evasive ability. Then we've got Undead Alchemist. If a zombie you control would deal combat damage to a player, instead that player puts that many cards from the top of his or her library into their graveyard. Whenever a creature card is put into an opponent's graveyard from their library, exile that card and put a 2/2 black zombie creature token onto the battlefield. This is another way of putting some zombie tokens onto the battlefield as well. Then we've got Hordewing Scob. This is going to give all your zombies flying. Whenever one or more zombies you control deal combat damage to one or more of your opponents, you may draw cards equal to the number of opponents dealt damage this way. If you do, discard that many cards. So this is a nice way of filtering your hand, and we do have a lot of ways of reanimating the creatures in our graveyard in this deck, so you could actually put some of your powerful zombies in there and then reanimate them with one of your reanimate spells. Ravenous Rotbelly is another new one in this deck. When it enters the battlefield, it may sacrifice up to 3 zombies. I would suggest sacrificing the ones with the decayed on them, and when you do sacrifice one or more zombies, each opponent will sacrifice that many creatures. So a really nice card to get some value off of those decayed tokens they will have on the battlefield. Then you've got Dreadhorde Invasion. Dreadhorde Invasion is a nice card for giving you a army token, and at the beginning of each upkeep you get to amass 1 and lose 1 life. It also, whenever you attack with a zombie token with power 6 or greater, it also gives it lifelink as well. This will come up sometimes in this deck since we do have ways of making some of our zombies into tokens, and we do have a lot of ways of pumping our tokens up as well, so we could potentially gain a lot of life off of Dreadhorde Invasion. Curse of the Restless Dead. This is another new one. Whenever a land enters the battlefield under enchanted player's control, create a 2/2 black zombie creature token with decayed. So this is an enchantment that you curse your opponents with, so choose wisely, as this is going to probably piss off one of your opponents when you play it on them. Open the Graves. Whenever another non-token creature you control dies, create a 2/2 zombie creature token. So it's a nice little engine. With Wilhelt, you can sacrifice one of your zombies, and then this will actually give you another zombie. So this is a nice little sacrifice engine in the deck. Works great with Wilhelt. If you sacrifice a zombie to draw a card at the end of your turn, this will replace it as well. Endless Ranks of the Dead's a 4-mana enchantment. At the beginning of your upkeep, put X 2/2 black zombie creature tokens onto the battlefield, where X is half the number of zombies you control rounded down. This card's going to put a ton of tokens on the battlefield each turn, so this is a must kill for your opponents. Zombie Apocalypse is another similar game-ending card. Return all zombie creature cards from your graveyard to the battlefield tapped, then also destroy all humans. So pretty cool card. I love the flavor on this one. Army of the Damned is going to create 13 tapped 2/2 black zombie creature tokens. Also has flashback for 1,000,000 mana, but another nice way of getting a bunch of tokens onto the battlefield. Then we've got Dark Salvation. It's an X spell. Target player puts X 2/2 black zombie creature tokens on the battlefield. Then up to 1 target creature gets -1/-1 until end of turn for each zombie that you control. So there's a nice removal spell, but also gives you a bunch of zombie tokens as well. Dread Summons. Each player puts the top X cards of his or her library into the graveyard. For each creature card put into a graveyard this way, you get to create a tapped 2/2 black zombie creature token for each one. So this will be for any card, even your opponent's cards that get put into their graveyard. So really nice card here as well. Next up, I want to talk about a couple of the cards that have some great utility in this deck. First up, I'm going to talk about a couple of key ramp pieces. We've got Crowded Crypt, which is a new one that's in this deck. It's an artifact you can pay to tap it to add a black to your mana pool, and whenever a creature you control dies, you can actually put a corpse counter on it. You can pay 6 and tap it, sacrifice it, create a 2/2 black zombie creature token with decayed for each corpse counter on it. So this is a nice token generating engine that you can use. If you don't need to use that mana producing ability later on in the game, you can cash this in and get a bunch of zombies off of it. Rooftop Storm is a awesome reprint. It was getting a little expensive. It is a 6-mana enchantment that you may pay 0 rather than pay the mana cost for zombie creatures you cast. So it's going to make all your zombies free. Obviously super powerful. If your opponents don't remove this, you'll be able to play all of your zombie spells for free. Then we get a couple of ways of bringing zombies back from our graveyard. We've got Gisa and Geralf. It's a legendary creature that is a great commander for a zombie deck as well. When it enters the battlefield, you get to mill the top 4 cards off of your library, and then during each of your turns, you may cast a zombie creature card from your graveyard. So really nice with Wilhelt's ability, where you're sacrificing zombies. Gisa and Geralf will bring them back. And we've got Ghoul's Night Out. It's a sorcery. For each player, you choose a creature card in that player's graveyard. Put those cards onto the battlefield under your control. They're black zombies in addition to their other colors, and they also have Decayed as well. Liliana Death's Majesty is a planeswalker that creates a zombie creature and then also returns creature cards from your graveyard to the battlefield, and then also has the ultimate of destroying all non-zombie creatures as well. So a very powerful planeswalker in a zombie tribal deck. Next up, we've got a couple of cards that are great in an aristocrats build. We've got Prowling Geistcatcher. This is a new one in this deck. Whenever you sacrifice another creature, exile it. If it was a token, put a +1/+1 counter on Prowling Geistcatcher. When it leaves the battlefield, return each card exiled with it to the battlefield under your control. So this is a nice way of getting your creatures back when they die, as long as this stays on the battlefield. Butcher of Malakir is a really nice one. Whenever it or another creature you control dies, each opponent sacrifices a creature. So this is a Dictate of Erebos on a stick. Really great card if you're sacrificing a lot of creatures, which we are going to be doing in this deck. Empty the Laboratory sacrifices X zombies. Then reveal cards from the top of your library until you reveal a number of zombie creature cards equal to the number of zombies sacrificed this way. Put all those cards onto the battlefield and the rest on the bottom of your library in a random order. So a really nice way of cashing in a bunch of zombie tokens or some really powerful zombies. You can go get some of your lords or some of your better creatures that you have in the deck and put those on the battlefield. So a really great card in here. Next up, let's go over the 10 cards that we are going to add to this deck for around $50 at the time of recording this video. So first up, we've got Graveborn Muse. It's a 4-mana zombie. At the beginning of your upkeep, you draw X cards and you lose X life, where X is the number of zombies you control. This card is amazing. This deck does have a little bit of a gap in the card draw section, so there's not a lot of card draw in here, which I feel like is very important in a tribal deck where you're trying to get in for combat damage to kill your opponents. Do have a little bit of an aristocrat sub theme here, but some of the pieces are missing for a full-on combo. But this is a nice way of accruing a ton of value. We're going to have a lot of zombies on the battlefield. We do have some ways of gaining life too to mitigate the extra damage that you're going to lose off of drawing a bunch of cards. But this is a really nice card. It's around $6 at the time of recording as well. Then we've got Plague Belcher. It's a 3-mana zombie out of Amonkhet. When it enters the battlefield, put 2 -1/-1 counters on target creature control. And whenever another zombie you control dies, each opponent loses 1 life. So we're going to have a lot of zombie tokens, and we have a lot of ways of using those tokens to get additional value. We have Wilhelt's ability. We've got a lot of other ways. Being able to get additional value off of it with having this on the battlefield by dealing each opponent 1 life is huge. It's going to close your opponent's life total gap so that you can get in for combat damage and win the game that way. Next up, we've got Corpse Harvester. This is one of my favorite cards from back in the day. It's a fun zombie. You can pay 2 and sacrifice a creature. Search your library for a zombie card and a swamp card, reveal them and put them into your hand, shuffle your library. This is a nice way of getting your powerful zombies from your deck into your hand. It's a nice little tutor. And it also gives you a swamp too, which is pretty cool. So if you're some lands, this is a nice way of getting them. Then we've got Noxious Ghoul. It's another old one. I used to have a zombie deck with Corpse Harvester and Noxious Ghoul in it back in the day when I first started playing Magic. But this one, whenever it or another zombie enters the battlefield, all non-zombie creatures get -1/-1 until end of turn. So if you have a crazy turn where you're able to put a bunch of tokens onto the battlefield, which we do have a lot of ways of doing that in this deck, this could potentially wipe all of your opponent's creatures and leaving all of your zombies onto the battlefield, which is not good for them because you'll be able to swing in and most likely kill one of your opponents with this. This did recently just go up to about $9. It is an older card, so expect this one to stay a little high in price for a little while. Similarly, we've got another older one. We've got Undead Warchief. It also shot up in price quite a bit to $14. Zombie spells you cast cost 1 less to cast, so awesome way of reducing all of the cost of your zombie spells. And this is a like mega zombie lord It gives all of your zombie creatures +2/+1. Only costs 4 mana 2, but it is only a 1/1. So only costs 4 mana 2, so it's not like super expensive in mana cost for the abilities that it gives you. Next up, we've got Bastion of Remembrance. This is an enchantment that when it enters the battlefield, it creates a 1/1 white human soldier token, which we don't really care about. But whenever a creature you control dies, each opponent loses a life and you gain 1 life. Another way of being able to take advantage of our creatures dying. We have, again, a ton of tokens in here that we're going to be able to sacrifice, get rid of, get additional value off of these drain abilities. Next up, we've got a personal favorite of mine, Ghoulcaller Gisa. It's one of my older commander decks that I had. This is in here mostly just because it's a pet card of mine, but you can pay black and tapper to sacrifice another creature and create X 2/2 black zombie creature tokens, where X is the sacrifice creature's power. So you can basically cash in your zombie tokens for more zombie tokens. If you got a lord or something out, you're almost always going to come out ahead in this exchange, which is really nice. She is a great card for this deck. Then we've got a sacrifice outlet. So we do want ways of getting additional value off of our zombie tokens, especially the ones with decayed. So I figured putting a powerful sacrifice outlet in the deck was very needed. So we've got Altar of Dementia. This is another one that has recently gone up in price. It was reprinted in Modern Horizons, but you can sacrifice a creature and target player puts a number of cards equal to the sacrifice creature's power from the top of their library into their graveyard. So this could be a win condition for your deck if you have a way of making a ton of tokens. You can sacrifice them all and mill one of your opponents out with it. Got another zombie in here that is another aristocrats zombie. We've got Vengeful Dead. Whenever it or another zombie you control is put into a graveyard from play, each opponent loses 1 life. Again, not a lot to say here. We do want a lot of ways of being able to deal this incremental damage to our opponents. Then last but not least, we have a way of dealing a ton of damage to our opponents. We've got Grey Merchant of Asphodel. When it enters the battlefield, each opponent loses X life, where X is your devotion to black. You gain life equal to the life lost this way. This is an awesome card. We're going to have a ton of black pips on the battlefield, and we're going to be able to gain a ton of life when this drains our opponents out, which we do have a lot of ways that we could lose life to draw cards. There's a nice card in here to be able to gain some of that life back. Next up, let's go over the cards that we're going to remove from this deck, and I'm not going to spend a ton of time on them, but I will quickly explain why I took them out. So first up, we've got Spark Reaver. This card is a very expensive sacrifice outlet, so you got to pay 3 mana and then sacrifice a creature or planeswalker to gain a life and draw a card. Got more efficient ways in the deck of doing this, so it needs to come out of here. Shadowkin is a flash shapeshifter that at the beginning of your upkeep, each player mills 3 cards. You may exile a creature card from among the cards milled this way. If you do, it becomes a copy of that card, except it has this ability. This is just a really convoluted way of copying your opponent's creatures. Yeah, I don't like this at all. It's expensive. You don't know what you're going to get. It would be cool in like a shapeshifter clone type of deck, but I don't really see the need of having this in a zombie tribal deck. So again, this is just needs to go. Having Ghoul Runebinder is a super expensive card that you can pay 3 and exile a creature card from your graveyard to put a 2/2 black zombie creature token onto the battlefield, then put a +1/+1 counter on each zombie creature you control. It's expensive, it's slow, it's very telegraphed. Your opponents will kill this. If you put it out, you're not going to get a whole lot of value out of this. Similarly, we've got another expensive card. We've got Stitcher Gorel. I do like this card in its own deck, but in here I don't like it. Pay 3 and tap it. Each player puts the top 3 cards of his or her library into his or her graveyard. Exile up to 2 creature cards put into graveyards this way. Put an XX blue zombie creature token onto the battlefield, where X is the total power of the cards exiled. Super slow. Not really what we want to do. Yeah, get it out of here. Again, a lot of the cards that we're going to remove are higher on the converted mana cost. We want to try to lower that converted mana cost as much as possible. We don't want a bunch of things in here that are 5, 6, 7, 8 mana that are clogging up your hand in the beginning of the game. So next up, we've got Siphon Flesh. It's a sorcery for 5 mana. Each player sacrifices a creature and you create a 2/2 black zombie creature token for each sacrificed creature. Again, the rate on this is not great. If your opponents don't have creatures, this really sucks. But to sacrifice your opponent's 3 worst creatures to get 3 zombies for 5 mana, not really great. Ruthless Death Thing, another 6 mana spell. It's a creature with flying. Whenever you sacrifice a creature, target opponent sacrifices a creature. Pretty good effect. Butcher of Malakir is just a lot better. It is 7 mana, so it's more expensive, but it's whenever a creature dies, you don't have to sacrifice it. So this one, a little bit more narrow in use than Butcher of Malakir is. Overseer of the Damned is just way too damned expensive. 7 mana creature with flying. Enters the battlefield, you can destroy a creature. And whenever a non-token creature an opponent controls dies, create a 2/2 black zombie creature token. It does have a powerful ability, but for 7 mana, it's just not game defining. It's not going to win the game, so I don't want it in here. Similarly, an even worse card is Eater of Hope for 7 mana, flying, sacrifice another creature and regenerate it, sacrifice 2 creatures and kill a creature. This is a terrible card. Definitely take that out of here. Curse of Unbinding is a cool card, but doesn't belong in this deck. I could see it going into the Curse Commander that just was released, but this is a curse. At the beginning of enchanted player's upkeep, that player reveals cards from the top of their library until they reveal a creature card. Put that card onto the battlefield under your control. That player puts the rest of the reveal cards into their graveyard. So pretty cool card. I mean, it is really expensive. It's 7 mana, so that's a ton, but there's really no point of having it in this deck. I think that this was just put in here for maybe the Curse Commander. Last but not least, we've got the most unimpactful card in my opinion in this deck. We've got Hour of Eternity. Cost 1,000,000 mana to get any use off of this card, but it's a sorcery. Exile X target creature cards from your graveyard. For each card exiled this way, create a token that's a copy of that card, except it's a 4/4 black zombie. So for 5 mana, you get a 4/4 black zombie. For 7 mana, you get 2 4/4s. For 9 mana, you get 3 4/4s. I don't know what mana you want to really put this in to where it's a good deal, but maybe 9 or 11 mana, but the game's going to be over by then, and you will not have won it by paying 11 mana, which is crazy because you can win the game for a lot less with something like Expropriate, which is what, 9 mana. You just basically will win the game. So this is just pretty useless. So take this one out as well. Thank you so much for watching this Budget Deck Tech today. If you have any suggestions for some of the picks in this deck, or agree with or disagree with some of the choices, let us know in the comments down below. If you like this video, consider subscribing to our YouTube channel if you haven't already, and check us out on Patreon over at patreon.com/BudgetEDH. There's a lot of different tiers for rewards over on Patreon. See you guys next time.